today we'll be discussing on the psychosocial development model of inferiority complex. All we are discussing here is the derived model from Eric Erikson's. These are the few stages of psychosocial development. So, what is inferiority complex? Okay,
Exactly is like inferiority complex, and
so
how does it like arise during the development of a child, and what are the factors that affect it? So what do you think about the stages of psychosocial development?
well, I believe before the stages of psychosocial development, I would put a bit of stress on how does the inferiority complex arise.
Uh-huh.
I believe that's the when the desirability towards a certain person or towards certain aspect externally arises within the subjective psyche, that desirability leads to inferiority complex. When a person thinks low of himself, and that would
Hmm.
start at the earlier stage and continue even till adulthood or afterwards. That, I mean, it depends on the way the child has internalized shame, or even the low self-esteem. So what do you think? I mean, what's your analysis on how badly it can be rooted within a child?
Yeah, you're right about like how it arises, and it's not just about like feeling inferior to others, but it's
Mhm.
also like the child also feels inferior to himself too. Like he will never grow up, and he will always stay like a child. So it's like, as you said, when they internalize it, it's not just an external influence; it becomes an internal influence too.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's that way.
We'll go through the Eric Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, and we presented all the, I believe some of the stages of psychosocial development. They are somehow derived from Freud's stages of psychosexual development, but not the same. Eric Erikson's differed in his approach. So the first stage is trust versus mistrust. It happens at
Mm-hmm.
very earlier age, I believe, from 1 month to 16 months or 12 months. It's a very early age. So it actually give rise to the child's basic necessity or virtue of hope. How does he develop hope, or otherwise how does he develops the fear for first time? So that happens is when the parent is unable to meet the needs of the child. If he's feeling scared, if he's feeling frightened, threatened, or even if he's crying and the parent is not able to respond towards the child, right? There's no
Yeah,
stability or
exactly.
consistency of care.
So at that stage of the life, like the most important need of a child is his or her need for protection,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
it's need for security. So when these basic things are not fulfilled, and like fear is allowed to freely roam, then the
Mhm.
child will develop mistrust in the
Exactly, mistress. Yeah.
protection of his
As a
parents.
negative consequence.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, if the care, if the I mean the child receives the consistent, predictable, and reliable care, he develops a sense of trust, which he'll carry even in the further relations in the life, even in
Yeah,
adulthood,
exactly, exactly.
right?
And in the Jungian terms, like it's called the divine feminine,
Yeah, exactly.
and the purpose of the feminine is to provide to be a like goddess for the young child, on whom he
Hmm.
relies for everything, for her nourishment
So
and for
don't you
her
think that the
everything.
divine feminine is the basic ground for the child development?
Yeah, it's very basic ground for an early infant. Like
Hmm.
at that stage you don't really need the role of the divine
A
masculine,
fatherly figure, yeah, or
as Jung
authority.
defines it.
Hmm.
You really need only the protection of a mother, because you're not just like psychologically or mentally dependent on her. You're physically
Or
dependent
either we can say that the
on her.
ego stage
It's like you're
hasn't
lactating.
been developed so much.
Yeah, ego stage hasn't been developed so much, and also
Mhm.
you are lactating, and you are also
Mhm.
literally dependent on her for food.
Yeah.
So
So that's why I said it's so related to the Freudian
exactly,
psychosexual development. It's almost the same. It seems like he has derived all those stages from him, but that's more about the social developmental model.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
so as you said that if those stability and consistency in care are not given, then the child can develop mistrust. And trust me, it leads to all other relations in life. That suspicion, anxiety may develop, right? So whenever, let's say, the child is threatened in adulthood or even in the teenage, he
hmm,
won't even realize that there would be someone coming to save him, right?
yeah,
The child
yeah.
would be in a very submissive state. I don't
Yeah,
think
it's
so he would
kind of
he would yeah.
it will be kind of a masochist behavior,
Yeah,
like
exactly, that's how it
internalized
develops.
behavior.
Yeah,
And
so
he will consider that it's something that he deserves. Like if
exactly.
someone is bullying him, he will like, no,
Mhm.
I deserve it, and he will like feel joy in it. I don't mean like feel joy in a positive way, but feel joy in
Yeah,
like
like some
it,
people
it will
feel,
produce
yeah.
guilt in him. It will produce sorrow in him, but it will be an active joy too.
Mhm. That would be
So
like a sweet pain and anguish,
yeah,
some kind of that
yeah,
thing.
exactly,
So yeah,
exactly.
trust me, these things even carry in relationships and even the social circles. They have a hard time to trust, and I
Yeah,
believe such people also develop the fear of intimacy. What do
yeah,
you think about that?
like like for example, you get vulnerable to another person when you trust in him. So
Hmm.
if you have developed the trust in the early stages of your life, you will be very reluctant in being vulnerable in front of someone. So in intimacy basically requires vulnerability.
Yeah, and
So
also the sound grounds where the person can trust the other.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so I believe
What
if
do you think about the projection of love thing? What are your views on this?
so, yeah, that's a good question. I believe if a child also, if as you said, that would develop a masochistic behavior. So, if someone has this kind of behavior, I believe uh, all his life, that kind of child would project the love on different people. Why? Because he didn't receive at right time the I mean consistent care and love from his parents. So that was the stage which was rightly needed for the child from the parents, so that he could know what actually the love is, what actually it feels like to be in the world. But
I see.
that was
I see.
yeah. So
So
that so
he
mhm.
will like expect love from others, but he will not understand that they are giving him the love.
Exactly, that's the thing. But he needs to realize that that's his own need. Sometime the child at the
Yeah,
stage of adulthood,
a need at a very pathological level. Like
it
it's not
reaches the pathological level. Yes.
a very healthy need when you expect unconditional love from others.
Exactly, that's the thing. And sometimes it becomes very toxic. I
Yeah,
don't know if you're aware of that, but it really becomes very toxic when you desire for the thing when you're not aware that it's a need within you, and you actually blame others that they are not giving you the proper love.
yeah,
So
exactly.
it's a kind of cycle that becomes very toxic if a person at adulthood doesn't realize that that's his own need being projected on the other.
Yeah, it's just basically like a victim behavior in this case.
Exactly, sort of victim behavior. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I believe we'll move to the next one.
yeah, exactly.
It's autonomy versus shame.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think this is the first stage of psychosocial development where the child learns to um, uh, assert the control over different things. It actually is the first step where the child uh, learns to control their abilities, learn to actually believe in their own will, powers, and qualities. I would say it seems very early age, but that's the stage where I would say the child develops a sense of inferiority or a stable personality. You see,
Yeah,
if
exactly. So I what you mean to say is that it is the age at which the child begins to develop his individuality, like
Yes, I would say
the
not
distinct
in the sense of
behaviors and
ego.
distinct likes and
Yeah, not
dislikes.
not in the sense of ego, because ego development would start at the age of 6. Till now,
Hmm.
I believe this is the age where the child ego is totally dependent on the parent, right? The parents
Okay.
can scapegoat unconscious projections and whatever, right? But the thing is that this is the age where child learns to, uh, I would say,
And
I
to
mean,
accept those behaviors.
yeah, I mean, it start to prioritize their own uh, clothing, sports, or whatsoever, their needs basically. So I would say he or she learns to be assertive in a sense. You'd see that there's certain child, they don't have an assertive ability. So that's the point. If let's say, let's take an example, if a child wants to wear a cloth and let's say a pant and a shirt and a shoes, they doesn't make any sense, right? They're totally different, but the parent stops them. They try
Hmm.
to be very angry on the child, right? And it's nothing to be angry, but they're projecting somehow their own anxiety, the two of them, right, have, and they're projecting on the child. So that's the
Yeah.
age where child starts to disempower his own abilities. He starts to shame his own self, which he received
Hmm.
actually from his parents, because
Yeah. Yeah.
he's not trusting his own abilities.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the age where the child gets familiar with the idea of choice. So
Idea of
basically,
choice,
yeah.
yeah, I
So
would say that that's
if
a good
that,
word, right?
so if that feeling is suppressed, if that freedom is suppressed, then he
Mhm.
can develop reliance on the parents to make the choices for him. Yeah,
And
you're
this
right.
is the stage even where the child is criticized more and overly controlled. I mean, they're
Hmm.
not given the opportunity to assert themselves properly, so they feel kind of inadequate. So their
Yeah,
ability to survive becomes
I've
less.
also seen that they sometimes express their behavior in a very repetitive way. Like
Mhm.
if they need something, they just keep weeping about it like
And
non-stop.
this is
So
this, yeah, that's true. And this is the stage I believe where
it's just
mhm,
I believe it's the reaction to a strict parental ego, because they know that they won't get the thing by the normal ways, so they
mhm.
just make it
So so
extremely difficult for the
do you
parents.
think that if we kind of introduce transactional analysis here, like this
Yeah,
is the
sure, sure.
age where the if the critical parental ego is hyperactive, right, from the parent
Yeah.
side, so this is the age where the child also internalizes that parental ego towards himself.
Uh, I
I mean, I mean,
yeah. So
yeah. Mhm,
so the thing I said that like they keep weeping until they get the thing. It's the projection. Oh, sorry, it's the reaction to that extreme parental ego from their parents. So it's
mhm.
yeah, it's their
So let's
parental
say
ego.
if on a they're trying to assert their choice, or they're trying to uh, I mean, they're trying to assert their abilities on something and playing plots or whatever. And if they're criticized, overly controlled, so they would develop or they would internalize that parental ego, right? And later in adulthood, what happens is that the child, when did something wrong, when he is totally I mean on his own, so when he did something wrong, what happens is that his own internalized dark parent ego would blame his own inner child. Why? Because that's called the adaptive child in transactional analysis. The child would respond, or his own parental ego would respond in the way his actual parents responded towards him.
Yeah, yeah.
You see the importance of the actual
Because
parent. How does
instead
it
of
get
developing
internalized?
an autonomy of instead of developing in other words a free will, he has developed the will of his parents. Like
Exactly. That's very good point. This is the stage where actually the free will, uh, if 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 it's properly supported by the parents, then he develops free will. Otherwise,
yeah,
it totally relies on the will of you can say parents,
yeah.
and he's
Yeah, because,
shamed or whatnot.
at that age, a child is very like it's not in a position to assert himself in front of his parents because he's totally reliant on them, and um, he cannot just rebel like an adult.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have the cognitive level to rebel against the parent. So
That
yeah,
that's the thing. I mean,
it partially rebels, like it keeps sweeping till he gets the stuff he wants and things like
exactly.
that.
So,
But
do
it
you
should not
think
do
that?
it like adults
Mhm.
do.
Do you think that the child who keeps on weeping and the parents, like, again, that would go back to the stage of trust and mistrust if he's given proper and consistent care, right? When he needs certain thing. So these all stages are interconnected. So let's say that if the child is crying and the parent is not responding towards the child's need, right? So what happens is that, don't you think the child internalizes the sadistic behavior?
Yeah, it kind of learns from the parents to ignore the sorrow and pain of others. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So if I mean, I know you're quite good at like cognitive functions. So I think at this age, he would least develop the extroverted feeling. What do you think?
Uh, I don't know. That's very different thing, and it's.
Hmm.
But I find it tough to relate here.
Or maybe that's like very a child or whatever. It's given by nature, and that couldn't be developed. That's what you're trying to say.
Uh, yeah, like I'm
So I believe that's the preschool age going when the child is just about to start the school, and that's the point where I believe child learns to explore the world, I would say.
yeah, yeah, take an initiative to do something on his own.
Yeah, and don't you think that's the point where he learns to build self confidence, self esteem?
Yeah, of course. Like when you do something on your own, you build self confidence. When you're reliant on others, like you don't build self confidence to that.
So this also involves kind of exploring your interpersonal skills through initiating the activities, I believe, because you are, I mean, at the age where you can interact with other children at school or even around you. So it's kind of opportunity to explore the interpersonal skills.
Yeah,
So,
you're right. It's as you said that it's about like asserting your control to make own decisions. Like when you are with the children of your age group, you are very much in control of everything you want to do. For
so
example, when children play, they make decisions on like
exactly,
which
yeah.
which toys they want to play, which
I think if at a certain age, I believe if the child gets too much submissive, when all these psychosocial stages are not properly met, right? So I believe this leads the child to be submissive. And
yeah.
how would you relate such kind of child wanting freedom, and such kind of freedom is accessed through watching
So
porn?
so okay, that's a very uh, later stage thing. So at this age, I'll give an example about this. So a very shy child of like 3 to 6 years, he will not be able to make decisions on uh, he will be looking for a parental figure to guide him to show him
So
like
that's a good
this is
point.
the right, this
How
is the way.
important do you think the teachers can be a good source of parental figures? That in today's age we really lack that. I mean, it reminds me of my own school days. We both studied together, right? So how would you just relate that the good
Well,
teachers?
I think that usually the teachers at preschool level and at very early schools are good at that are usually females. Females
Mhm.
with this reason that at that age, children are in more need of a mother than a father,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, as we discussed, that they strengthen their grounds for the feminine, for the divine feminine, right?
yeah, exactly.
So
So
mhm.
the divine feminine is basically a nourishment providing uh, uh, yeah टूर
So
नहीं कहूँगा यार वो टूर से बड़ा रिलेटेड हो जाएगा
it's a nourishment providing, you can say, figure.
yeah figure okay
Mhm.
so so yeah like yeah
So this is the specific stage, the initiative versus guilt, where the child really needs the external authority to build self confidence.
yeah so it's so a parent basically we are not saying that parents should let the child make the decisions by himself,
Obviously, it
because
should be in a modulated way.
the child cannot do that. Like, he's not at that cognitive level to see the risks associated with certain things. So,
Hmm.
so we obviously need the guidance and the observation of the parent to for
Hmm.
the protection of the child. But in a very protective environment, the parent should like allow the child to choose with what things he wants to play and with what people he wants to interact. Like when children go to preschool, they make friends, like,
Yeah, exactly.
so
Mhm.
so they make the choice on the basis of their own free will, like, and it is very much related to their parents too. Like, it's usually that the friends they make have similar parents.
Yeah, I mean, but do you think that it happens like at a, as you just said, that they would choose the friends, they would have a similar parents? Does that happen consciously?
I don't think so that happens consciously,
Exactly,
because
that happens a very
at
unconscious
that
level.
level, overall general consciousness has not developed that much.
Exactly.
So
So,
that is the main reason that we give the early child, to the care of divine feminine, because the divine feminine can nurture the
but that's
unconscious
a
in a very
very good point. I never thought this way. Like the basically the child would go for the other friends would have a similar parents like him, and actually that's the projection of the parents towards the child, that he accepted it, because projection is what we don't know, how do we accept that, right? So that's not consciously happening. So yeah, right, because I see that happening all around. Mostly people, like the people even at adulthood or even the teenage, they are making the friends of their parents child. I would say that that's the adaptive child's ego state in action, because that's what their parents
yeah.
wanted the child to do.
It can be healthy and it can be unhealthy.
Exactly,
Basically, it
it
depends
really depends on the
on
parent.
the choices they make and how they raise the child.
Yeah, so okay, Allahu Akbar. Acha. What's the case scenario will change? Yeah, so I believe this is the stage where the child, as we discussed before, learns to make decisions, right? So either he has a conflicting message from the parent, uh, like I hope you're familiar with the term double bind. What happens is in that is the child receives conflicting messages from parents and teachers. So it's a kind of two-way conflicting messages. So let's say if if someone asks the parent that I want to go to a friend's home, or I want to go and meet one of my friend, right? And the parent says, okay, you can go, but I mean that's your choice. It's up to you if you want to go or not. So
I see.
you see the tone
Yeah.
and the context. It's they're giving you the permission and also not. So
Yeah, exactly.
so the
So it, it,
child's
it makes a child very much unsure about what to do, and
exactly
they usually submit to the but
submit to the
thing.
parents. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and even this is the stage
Yeah,
where
it basically happens to everything that the parents say you can do this, but these conditions.
I believe we didn't discuss the guilt how that's imposed on the child unconsciously. So let's say if the child is unable to meet the needs of parents, whatever they, I mean, guided him to do to assert their control. So unconsciously, the child receives the guilt of parents, right?
Yeah. So
And that
basically, parents should do it in a better way. Like, if they want to make a statement like, "Do this," but uh, so after "but" they should add a thing that is not contradicting the first thing.
exactly
And
that's the true
secondly,
essence of
secondly,
double bind.
secondly, they should not lie to their child. It should be perfectly clear. For example, in the case that they don't want the child to go to his friend's house. Okay, it's
Hmm.
fine. So they should say it like, uh, you cannot go to your friend's house
Hmm.
unless you finish your homework, or like unless you grow up to the age of 5. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly. I
perfectly
mean,
fine.
there
It's
should be a
fine to stop them
convincing. Mhm.
visit their friends at a very small age. Like, if the parents are not comfortable with the parents of the other child, or due to many social reasons,
Mhm.
it's fine, but lie to them. Just let them know that you will allow them in future, or if you will not, like,
Exactly. At least tell them the
get the
reasons.
condition. Yeah,
understanding
be
their,
honest with them.
yeah, their needs. And because this way, if you stop them for no reason or stop them doing what they want, that would be like imposing guilt on the child. And that's again, that's the stage where the child would have a masochistic personality, because he would think that he can't do anything on his own.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
what's the next? Industry
Ooh,
versus inferiority. That's a huge thing, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the age, I believe, where the child develops his independent ego. So what happens, according to my subjective view, is that the child learns to compete with his fellow peers, I mean friends in the class, and people around him. Obviously, people of same age around him. So let's say if the child gets low marks in school, right? And
Mm.
obviously, you know what society we're living in, the teachers would never console the child, or would never, as you always talk about cause and effect, they would never know the cause, and they never try to know the cause, right? They would
Yeah,
just blame the child. Or even using the transactional analysis, we say that the
they
parental
will just
ego of,
call the child up. Yeah,
exactly, the parental ego of the teacher would be super active. They would just directly hit the child ego. And
yeah.
when the
Basically, it's just their own insecurity that they were unable to.
result, right? So what happened was that he was bullied, he was shamed in the school, and
Mhm.
same thing happens in at home. So imagine the state of the child. He would be like shame in the school and at the home. So that kind of a, it's, it really is a very hard situation for the child, and that's the stage where he learns to know his abilities, and also he learns to compete himself with others. So imagine his sense of self-esteem being so low that, and that's the stage where he compares himself with others. So
Don't
how
you think this is the age where the bullying starts?
exactly,
In the,
that's the age, because that's the age where he know what it's being himself, because he's developing individual ego. So that would be the age where he would know what actually bullying is, and he would actually internalize that thing. So this is the stage
yeah.
where, I mean, uh, ego development is not dependent on the parents, but on his own. But just to remind, this ego development is very much relied on the previous all life he spent with his parents, and his ego
Mhm.
development would be accordingly to, like, the parents responded towards him.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
very much related to that. So I believe.
Parents. So if the parents constantly like bullied the child at home, I call it bullying when you prohibit a child from something without providing justification, or you beat them without
Mhm,
properly explaining that why you beated them.
mhm.
Uh,
Yeah,
it's
that's true. I believe.
like this is the point that where they start internalizing masochism or
Mhm,
sadistic, even sadistic behavior. It just depends on the child, that if he's shy and he's not rebellious, then he will be masochistic, and if he's very an aggressive child and you beat it, then it will start uh, projecting that aggression on other children, and
You're very
he will
right here,
become.
but but I have a reservation here. See, if I don't think so, the child would be able to even develop his natural child ego state. I would say that he would only have the adaptive child state, because see, if only he has been receiving negative consequences from the earlier stages. See, if the child in the first stages, mistrust and initiative and guilt, and all those stages have been not properly taken care by the parents, he
Mhm.
won't be able to show his real self. He won't be able to be vulnerable. That's the natural child state, right? So
Yeah, yeah. So
the only thing happens is he would be adaptive child, depending on what the parents want him to do.
so two things can happen. Like one thing, we are basically talking about inferiority complex. So this is the age in which if the parents have not supported a child in a proper way, so he can either develop an inferiority complex, or he can even develop a superiority complex due to that. A very industrious behavior
Yeah, exactly.
in
I
which
mean, they
he
can be both
projects
both
himself
things.
onto another. Like you need, it's not just the children who get bullied. Uh, if there is no existence of the bullies.
Yeah, that's true. But again, that's how would a child learn to know or respond towards such a thing before? I mean, without any external
yeah yeah
authority, I would
yeah
say.
Basically it's, I believe it's, it also depends on the inherent nature of the child. So
Hmm.
so the, like, I believe that the foundations of our behaviors, like whether we will be very aggressive, or we will be passive, or like we will be introverted or extroverted or stuff like that, a part of it is in
Hmm.
our genes, and a part
Hmm.
of it is through our environment.
So,
So
so do you think that would I believe
it's the
Jordan?
expression of the genes too. Yeah.
So, do you think that what Jordan Peterson always talks about, like the dominance and superiority that's inherited in us? So, do you think that you can relate all those hierarchy
it's
here?
it's, it's inherited, like, have you read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, so he explains two kinds of dads in that, like a rich
Hmm.
dad and a poor dad.
Hmm.
Like, a
Hmm.
rich dad is the one who teaches his child with confidence, and to be like responsible for his actions, and to make
Hmm.
informed decisions, everything like that. uh, Basically to instill behavior in him, that he is in control of his stuff, and he can be the inheritor of the wealth, his wealth.
Hmm. Hmm.
While a poor dad will always stop him from doing stuff in the fear of failing, basically, yeah. In the fear
Yeah.
of
So,
failing, he,
so don't you think he's actually projecting his own fear?
of course, he is projecting his own fear on his child, but it also depends on the child whether he accepts it or not, due to his inherent nature, which is usually like
But here's the point.
suppressible,
But here's the
by
point.
nurture.
Without developing the individual ego, how would the child have a barrier or a defense against the projections of parents?
Well, I believe that as I initially said, that some of our behaviors are innate in us. So
Hmm.
it will really depend on a child whether he is able to cope with abuse. Some children will be able to cope with it better, and some will be not be able to cope with it better. And from the same behavior from a parent, one child can develop one extreme, and the other child can develop another extreme of the behavior. So it
That's true.
happens in,
Ye-
it happens in
mhm,
siblings. It happens in
mhm,
siblings too. Like the elder brother becomes sadistic, and the younger brother becomes masochistic, or vice versa. Like, well,
mhm.
they had parents. They had the same nurture, and they had the same upbringing. But yeah, well, what's the variable that is changing?
So it's just maybe the way they perceive everything. It's
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
It
The
really
way they
depends on their
perceive.
subjective perception.
Yeah, exactly. That is the innate behavior. That is their
Mm.
instincts. Instincts that
Yeah,
differ.
that makes sense. A part of
Their
collective
power of,
unconscious.
yeah, exactly. Their power of observation differs. Like at what point, how they are observing a certain thing, from
Hmm.
what angle, and secondly, and how they are internalizing it. Like some people internalize
So
uh,
these
basal
behaviors which you
behaviors,
say
and some
that
people
with
internalize other kind of
mhm.
behavior. So
so,
it,
so
it really differs.
so as you just said that there's some innate behaviors which the child has inherited, right? So I would say that let's say this is a part of, if it's inherited, that's a part of collective consciousness, let's say that, right? So are we saying that the collective consciousness can differ by nature from person to person?
Well, I believe that genetics have some part in it. So if you are like, if you, so it's like, basically it's very it, it's not just like very common, but there is a strong correlation that the parents are of high IQ, then the child will be of at least above average IQ or better, because of not just that the parents will raise him to be a intelligent individual, but
Mm-hmm.
because he will inherently possess the ability to internalize the correct things, to learn from his parents. So yeah.
So that's the thing. I truly understand that, but for that, the parents need to be conscious or actively doing their actions. Because if they're actively and consciously doing that, then that's the only way the child would
A child.
internalize positive
Yeah.
things.
So it's a very common thing that the early developmental the psychologists who study the developmental behavior of children say that the parents who speak more words in front of children, like more variety of words, not just
Mm-hmm.
more words,
Mm-hmm.
like repeating the same word in front of them, that I love you and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. They
Mm-hmm.
say but a diverse variety of words to expand their internal dictionary. So it helps a lot in their early cognitive development, and this is exactly a main difference due to which the children in Western societies uh, have more developed, like more exhibit more developed behaviors than in some of the Eastern societies where parents don't talk to their children. I'm not generalizing here, but
No, no,
yeah, I'm kind of, yeah,
but that's very
it's,
good point. That
I'm kind
so
of generalizing too. So
no, but that's a good
yeah.
point. So you're trying to say that the interaction between the child and the parent. So do you think that that kind of interaction would, I mean, lessen the barrier between the child and the parent? Because all we see around is that parents have developed a very fine, I would say it's a very strong boundary which they have developed, and that's the boundary which they just destroy in adulthood.
Well, actually, that's the boundary which they inherited from their own parents and
Exactly, that's the
inherited
thing.
from their
Yeah.
own. So basically, never in their life they reached a point where they understood that what they're doing is wrong, and never in the lives of their ancestors anyone
Mhm.
recognized that this behavior
So,
is not
how much
the right way.
responsible do you think the parents are for projecting their unconscious patterns, which they inherited from their own parents? How much they're responsible for projecting all that burden on the child? I mean, I would just love to know that how much responsible they are actually, because the child. What's the fault of the
Well,
child?
as we like discussed it earlier, that it really depends on how much the child internalizes that behavior the parents are trying to project on him. So basically, it also depends on the subjective perception of the child. But overall, like it has a huge effect. It has a huge effect on
Yes,
children,
definitely.
and
Because I mean, I,
because that is how, like, it is inherited to generations and generations. Like, very rarely the chain breaks unless someone consciously recognizes that this is the problem that needs to be fixed. It gets
and
inherited.
that's a huge problem, I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we can say that this is the stage where the child basically learns the virtue of competence. This,
This is also the stage where the parents offload their parenthood to the teachers. So it's not just about the
Mhm,
parents anymore.
mhm.
It's about, like,
Yes,
children get additional
I,
parents.
yeah, that's what I
They get
remember from
additional
the.
parents, and they
Mhm,
get additional children. So they see how other children are interacting with their parents, how other
mhm,
children are interacting with their teachers, and
mhm.
how they differ from them. Like, they learn a lot from how
So,
other
do you
children
think
are.
what you just said? It reminds me of one concept. There's a Bowen theory, and there's a step in that emotional cutoff from the family. So, do you think that when
Mhm.
the parents it's sort of their uh, giving their child to the teachers for
Mhm.
their growth, right? So, do you think that the parents are emotionally cutting off their child and giving the responsibility to the parents? And what happens is that they are expecting more from the teachers, because when you're emotionally cutting off from a person you expect more when you throw the
Exactly. They are,
responsibility on someone
they are,
else.
they are basically offloading their responsibility.
Hmm.
Well, it's fine if you are upholding your end of the bargain too, and
Mm-hmm.
you are playing your role in the nature and nurture of the child. But if you are totally operating it to the children, that or to the teachers, that they will teach manners to your children and everything, well, that's where the children will start to disassociate from you because they will find you useless.
Exactly, and that really happens. So what happens when the child actually tries to learn from the teachers, or you see that they're mostly what I believe what I have been through in my school. I can see, you
Mhm.
know that better, right? The
Yeah.
even regardless of you perform well or not at the end of exams, the
Mhm.
teachers would, I think so, they would unconsciously scapegoat the child. That's what I read it everywhere. That's an
It's
unconscious process
that,
where the
that
teachers and the parents they select the targeted child for their
mhm.
projections.
Yeah, exactly. The failure of a child at that age to like produce the results that the teacher, the parents want them to produce, are actually the shortcomings of the parents and the
Shortcoming,
teachers
yeah,
themselves.
that's
And
true.
just
They're
projecting
really the
them to
shortcomings.
their kids. So it's like I mean they justify it through that the world will be unfair with the children and they need to be taught that that thing. But I don't think so that it's anything more than
So
a
so
projection.
for that, so we come to a point that the teachers should be really aware of their own shortcomings, or what we call in Jungian terms as shadow, right? Their
Yeah.
own inferior qualities, right? Even the parents, it's not just the teachers, even the parents should know their inferior qualities. It can be anything, anger, I mean, any of the
and, uh,
inferior.
and also just to summarize this point and just to add to it, that at this stage at 6 to 12 years old, it's not just about the child and the parent anymore, and the
Mhm.
child and the parents anymore. It's the addition of additional parents and additional children in their life. So observing their interactions is very important for them too. So basically they are slowly getting out of the influence of the their parents and getting in the society in a
So I
very
believe
very
that's also the age where the children, as I said at the start when I just told about inferiority, that it's the desirability of a person towards something else, right?
yeah.
When you desire more, you make yourself less. It's all about magnifying something at a larger scale. When you magnify something at a larger scale, then you make yourself very low, right?
At
So
this stage it is also like if a child is feeling inferiority, it is like the flames are more blown by
exactly
observing more confident people. Like if a
that
child
exactly
if a child
that's what
has
I was
inferiority
trying to say.
complex and he's surrounded by very confident people,
Mhm.
he will develop more inferiority complex because he will never have the courage to face them. like
So
like for example, if you have a weak eyesight, like you cannot face the sun.
yeah, that's true. Yeah. So the point is that at this age, the child seeing other people, I mean the other friends or child around it, as you said, that flames kind of more desirability of having good parents, maybe, or it also strengthens his inferiority. It's a kind of pattern, I would
Like
say, that gets strongly rooted.
exactly. This comparison with the peers, as you
Mhm.
mentioned, is
Mhm.
is, is what like makes what they have learned previously. Either it sometimes removes their previous guilt and stuff like
Mhm.
that too, and negative feelings too, because they learn it from their new parents or from the new children how to behave and respond better to abusive parents. Like
Mhm.
they learn how to take
So
initiative
I
through a
believe, and
better
that's
friend.
the step where they are either consciously or unconsciously try to escape from the parents, but
Yeah.
unfortunately they are not, because they have the fear of abandonment. Because they are totally
Well,
relying
well,
on.
because that reliance that the parents that was built in the last 5 to 11 years was very very strong, and the dependence is still there. Like you are financially dependent on your parents, and you're still emotionally dependent on your parents because you spend more than
Mhm.
half of the days with your parents.
Mhm.
immediate
So,
family.
so do you think? I believe that's the fear of abandonment that carries on through entire life, even with the relationships. I have seen that
Yeah,
people get stuck in relations due to this fear of abandonment. If I'm
yeah,
not wrong, I'm not talking like empirically or scientifically, but
you're kind of right. Like it's both fear of abandonment and fear of acceptance from others. Like people stick to abusive relationships because of uh, just because like they will be abandoned by their family, or
or maybe
because no one
or
else
maybe
will
that's a good point. Actually,
no one
that could
else will
also be the
accept their
projection of
decisions.
love. As you said that they stick to the abusive relations, I believe that's the projection of love. They are seeking love everywhere. They are seeking
Yeah, they are.
acceptance everywhere.
Yeah, it's projection of love when it's sadistic behavior. It's like the opposite thing when it's the masochistic behavior, when you
Yeah,
are
but the
you when
same
you are
person can
projecting the
exhibit the
feeling
both
that
behaviors.
no one will love you. You are
Exactly.
unlovable. You're
Yeah.
unlovable.
And
That's what basically the inferiority complex is, the feeling that no one will love you because of how you look,
exactly.
because this is the
I
age
have
where
seen that there's
the
certain
child
people who
gets.
are very competitive and they really have some potential, but still they possess such kind of inferiority complex. It's just because and and you know what, that potential and all their competitiveness get arrested with the fog of those prior bias which he has been given by the society, by
Society. Yeah,
teachers and
yeah.
parents.
At this stage, the not only the parents are responsible
No, no, obviously not yet.
for the pathological development of a child. The entire mini society, not the entire society, the mini society of the school is also responsible for it.
Yeah, that's I mean that's a good word to use. Mini society because we spend like a good time there. So I believe
Yeah,
the
it's a sandbox. It's a little sandbox of a society. Like there are not too many people. There are just a few people you are interacting with, but those people
but
are
that's the
what
second
you
home.
spend every
That's the
day.
time we
Yeah,
almost spending 8 hours a day, and I don't think so. We get that much time at our homes spending with our parents.
because yeah, we spend most of the time like resting.
So, do you think that all the masochistic or sadistic behaviors internalized with all these stages would, as even I asked that earlier, I believe it would lead to the fear of intimacy. You know why? Because the child would think that he is not good enough. He won't be loved, as you said that, right? So he kind of have he kind of develops the fear of intimacy. So when people try to love him, he has developed strong defenses. This is what
Yeah,
I'm talking
yeah,
about after the age of 6, between 6 to 18 even, right? So
yeah.
he
It just lingers on to the rest of the life,
yeah, so what
unless it is resolved.
exactly.
So,
So
so,
what
so
happens
yeah,
is
the
that he
feeling.
has built his strong defenses. Why? Because he has a perception of his own self that he is not good enough. So whenever someone tries to get intimate, I mean in the terms of emotions, or when someone tries to know him, what would happen is that person is unconsciously wanting the love, right?
Yeah,
But what happens is consciously he's trying to push that person away. Consciously
yeah.
he's trying to hate that person who is trying to show him his actual self that you possess these good qualities.
So don't you think it's a form of cognitive dissonance?
It is actually, but and that's the point where the child undergoes bad depression and anxiety. That's the because see, his own perception and the actual reality would collide.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So it's basically internalizing a hypocritical behavior.
exactly. That's very true. I mean, that's what happens. So imagine a child at the age of maybe 6 or onwards suffering from cognitive dissonance. I mean, even if I talk at a neurological perspective, that would have a huge impact on the child. I mean, it could lead to uh, his inability to to perform well even in the problem solving things. His prefrontal cortex, which I believe is involved in uh, which is hyperactive during decision making and all
But
those stuff.
I think it can also lead to the artistic behavior in children.
Sorry, autistic. You're saying autistic or artist?
Artistic, like
Y- y-
um, for example, um, they may develop some disability to read, like dyslexia or
Oh,
something
oh,
like
all
that.
right. Yeah, definitely they can, because obviously, if the cognitive dissonance is happening at so earlier age, they really undergo some of the symptoms of that which you're talking, right. That's true. Because imagine, I mean, even if the adult goes through the cognitive dissonance, the anxiety is at so much extreme that they can't bear it. So
Yeah.
it again it comes to the point that the child needs to accept the good
Yeah,
things in them.
and one more thing that I would like to add here is that when such thing happens, the psych uh,
Hmm.
starts to activate its defense mechanisms. Like
Hmm.
you cannot find joy in the external world. You get more and more stuck in your internal world, and
Hmm.
due to that, when you don't observe the external world, you are not getting enough information to
So I would just
uh,
expand your
ego.
question. Imagine an introverted child suffering from all these things.
Yeah,
Imagine through what situation he would go. I mean, introverted child. He's an introverted, and all that cognitive dissonance and these prior stages which we have just discussed, and
a very shy child, and
very shy and very low self-esteem, and obviously again masochistic behavior. He won't, and such people I believe has have fear of commitment as well. And how they develop fear
because
of.
because they don't trust themselves. Like
Exactly, that's
how
the
how
first
can they
stage.
how can they commit to something when they don't trust that they can fulfill the commitment?
Exactly. Imagine the things happening at from 1 month to 16 months. That's a very earlier stage. Parents, and even
Hmm?
we think that they would not have any impact on the child, but imagine this is the thing you rightly pointed out. This is the thing which leads to the fear of commitment, and most people do have that. And such people, I would say, run from responsibilities. And I mean, no wonder, because the fear of commitment would always leads to. I mean, they would run from responsibilities. They would never try to develop the masculine in them. So that's what I think.
Yeah, the the they will not develop the component that will enable them to be a part of an independent part of a society that
Mhm.
can be
So,
relied on,
mhm.
that
so
can
I believe with
fulfill its.
such childs who have fear of intimacy and fear of commitment, people need to be careful for them, because what we try is we try to be kind. Obviously that's what it's needed from other people towards those childs, but they do not need to force their actions upon those childs, because they have developed a long term defense. And it's really, I would say, the
This is the age where uh, children also develop a very passive aggressive behavior due
exactly,
to
exactly.
this
Because
projection
if
of their
someone is
parents,
trying to if someone is trying to distort your reality, your perception
yeah,
about yourself, you
you will
would
fight.
definitely. Exactly.
You will fight.
And that's when I said that people with fear of intimacy and the ones who are trying to be close with them, they would try to push them away.
Yeah, yeah,
And why?
exactly.
So there comes a question: why do they suffer from cognitive dissonance? Because there's a clash of conscious and unconscious. Unconsciously, they're wanting love, but consciously, their reality, their ego perception is continuously haunting them, because their reality is totally colliding with their unconscious. So
So
that's what
it's
happens.
basically a hypocrisy inside their psyche,
Exactly.
a fight between their conscious and unconscious.
And that drains a lot of energy. Even
Yeah,
in adulthood, even if we experience that, it would drain a lot of energy.
with no energy. Like consider like something requiring. Consider it like one end is like positive energy and one is negative energy, and both are your energies. So they both collide. They leave you with nothing.
With nothing, exactly. And I don't
You
think
you
so.
you you get nothing in return for spending that energy.
Exactly. And next time you won't even spend that much time looking deep into yourself, into your issues.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
and that's another, I mean,
because you have contradictions.
Exactly, that's what happens. So let's move towards the next identity versus role
So,
confusion.
so you're going to let the child grow now? Huh?
Yeah, I want to let the child grow because
Oh, I don't want the child to grow. It will grow out of my influence.
I mean, see that's what also one of the patterns of parents. You know what? They don't want to let the child do whatever they want. Why? Because they have fear
Exactly,
of losing their dominance.
especially at this age, the age of 12, when the puberty starts to hit some children,
So
and
no, this is
they,
the age actually where parents fear to lose their own dominance. Don't you think
yeah,
that that's the fear of parents of losing? Even see, I read Development of Personality by Carl Jung. So he wrote that at this age, not he didn't discuss at this age, but he discussed about the dominance in parents. He said that parents have a fear to get old and to lose their
mhm.
dominant behavior. So I believe that's the age where child actually learns to know about the world and also what career he would be going in, and also like
And learn to assert that dominant behavior as part of
exactly
himself.
because yeah, and that would be the stage where actually he develops the
Because,
personal identity.
because if we keep in mind the Freudian aspect of it, so it is the age where your sexual development is occurring. So with the sexual
Exactly.
development, there is just a rush of
S-
new hormones in you, and like
exactly, I mean,
um,
we can't just
give rise
ignore.
to all kinds of behaviors. So you might have heard like puberty hit him hard and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. So obviously we can't ignore the hormonal effect and all those occurring at this age. They have a huge impact on the child. I believe just not if we are too like specific about the gender, then I believe among the girls, the parents need to be really careful with them at this age. I mean, at the emotional level, they
Yeah.
really need to look around them at this age because they're
Because
really more in contact with the emotions of their child at this age. So
yeah,
let's say at this age the child develops his personal values, beliefs, and goals, right? So and that's the age where he receives the role projection from parents. Unlived life of parents is projected onto the child at this age.
yeah, the parents start telling them that you will become a doctor, you will become a
Exactly.
pilot, you will become this, you will become that. So before this, let the actually it starts in the previous age group, like from the 5 to 12 years old age group. Like
Mhm.
they slowly start projecting their unfulfilled desires, like they wanted to be a doctor, or so they want their child to be a doctor, or they
And
found
no,
or
and
they
no,
found someone in their family to be very successful just because he is a doctor.
exactly.
So they said
And
that
no, imagine that if all the
he was
previous
successful.
stages have not been properly or healthily developed in the child, imagine how would the child go for his own decision. Let's say
Yeah,
if the child wasn't good in initiative stage, if it wasn't good in industrial stage, how would the child go for his own decision in the career?
yeah,
So
exactly.
so that's the
So
age. Mhm.
I'm not saying that the parents should not contribute anything to the decision of the child. They should basically they have spent the most time with the child. Like no one
Mhm.
else spent that much of the time with the child. So when you spend time with someone, you realize that this person has this potential.
Mhm.
If looking and observing properly, of course that's a given. It's not the case with pathological parents who don't care about their children, are
Mhm.
very cut off. But
Mhm.
for the healthy parents who are properly observing the behaviors of their children, they know that their children have potential in, for example, in arts. Like some children are very gifted in arts, and at this age they start to exhibit their gift. And
Mhm.
some children
Mhm.
are very good at public speaking, and they
But do you
start
think that they would
uh,
actually go to their parents and say
sports.
that, okay, I'm interested in arts? I don't think so. That if the prior stages are not healthily developed, they would have the confidence to go to their parents. What actually we experience, I mean, we will really talk about the.
Actually, the child will also not be, if the previous stages are not healthily developed, the child will also not be familiar with the fact that he is a good artist because he was
And
never given
exactly
a
to
bunch of
assert
pictures
to
to draw.
assert the control, because that's the stage where he learns that what abilities he have.
Yeah,
So in,
let me give you an example. Like if you are a very good artist by nature, but you never draw a single thing, how will you know
Mhm.
that you are a very good artist?
Exactly, and that would happen. Actually, I
And
never.
parents actively suppress, some parents actively suppress this behavior in the children. They don't let them do certain kinds of stuff. Like some of them prohibit them from certain
Do you think
sports.
that the inferiority of parents is projected on the child at this age?
Well, yeah, not just this age, it's also projected at earlier ages. But
Hmm.
at this age, the child,
No, in terms of
you
roles,
can.
I mean.
Oh, I see. I see. So you are talking about the rich dad poor dad thing.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I mean, that's the stage where the parents actually project their unlived lives. If the parent wanted to be a doctor, right, and they didn't have, let's say, the proper uh, financial situations, let's say, proper resources, so obviously they don't consider the child to be an independent individual. They would definitely project their roles. So, how would you differentiate between a healthy parent willing his child to be a successful doctor and between a parent who is actually projecting his own will? Because
well,
that's a question that pops in my mind, right?
you put uh, a healthy parent doesn't like say his child to become a doctor, because basically doctor is not becoming a doctor is not a field that you can judge for a 12-year-old child, no matter how much how better you know him. uh,
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That for an artist, because children can exhibit artistic behavior way more
No,
clearly, like.
I meant in terms of going into a medical field, let's say doing MBBS or MD or whatsoever. So I was just like curious to know that how one can differentiate between the patterns of a healthy parent and the ones who are projecting their roles onto
well,
the
well,
child.
in terms of complex careers like MBBS, it's not something that you can decide for a child at the age of 12 years old. You need to let him grow, let him graduate, and or at least near the graduation from high school, because that is the time when the child is interacting with the world, independent of their parents too. Like they are interacting with the teachers, they are interacting with the other students, and they are developing their own interests in certain fields. So just see where their potential is going, and uh, support them in their decisions. Like uh,
but but that
I
but
mean,
that but that really happens. That's not what uh, you see very frequently happening, that the parents moving on with the flow of child and their
mhm,
abilities, they don't really go with that. What happens is that they would try to, and you know what, as we always discuss, when they are trying to assert or project the roles onto the child, they would
mhm.
never use their parental ego. They would go into the
Child
vulnerable
state, yeah.
child state, right? And that's the stage where the guilt is imposed on the child if he doesn't fulfill that requirement.
Yeah, so there are like it differs in it also depends on the socio-economic level of that family, like
Obviously,
whether
those are the
whether
factors to be
whether
considered.
it's a very conservative family or very liberal family, or whether it's a rich family or a poor family, or um, a lot of things happen. Like generally poor families have fear of taking risks, so they will avoid their children from adopting careers that have a risky like behavior. For example, journalism is something that is not a very sure career, I would say. Like unlike being in the medical profession, in which if you graduate you are a doctor and you can easily get a job, and a
That's true.
stable
Yeah.
job, stuff like that. So they don't, or being an artist, like they have very very unsure careers. They don't know if they will earn well or not. They can earn in millions, or
So
they can earn in.
that can be a complex thing if a child is either from a it really depends with the socioeconomic, I mean, conditions of the family. So
Yeah,
are we trying to say that these
and as like I would like to add the perspective of Freudian perspective in it. Like he always studied the history of his patients and their like their family histories and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
to better analyze their behaviors. And in the family histories we see that such things like whether they are rich or poor, or they are what are their
Because
political
definitely
alignments.
they have an impact, they have a long lasting impact on the individual, because the family, it, see, the family would always project their inferior things on the child or onto the other group, that's for sure.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
let's move on to the next slide. Operant conditioning. So okay, so let's take an example. Okay, so imagine a child who who performs very well in the school. Why? Because the teacher constantly praises that child for performing good, right? So that's a positive reinforcement, that's a
Oh,
stimulus by the teacher, right? And
yeah.
that would have an impact on the child's psyche. He would know that when I'm performing good, I'm receiving praise from my fellow peers and from the teacher. So that's a, and it happens with regular intervals, different days, different times, and that's a forced behavior which child has like internalized. If I'm performing good, I'm receiving the praise. If I'm performing good, I'm receiving gifts from my parents. If I'm performing good, I'm receiving appreciation from my peers. So that's the positive reinforcement. And let's say if the child is not performing well in the studies, there might be some situations. What happens is that the parents start to give less time to the child, and the teachers uphold,
Basically
yeah,
teachers will do it for.
teachers would uphold that appreciation or praise from the child. And even the peers, they might move apart. I don't think so the peers, but the teachers would uphold the praise and appreciation from the child, and he
Teachers
would
will not
know
give them as much
exactly
attention as the
that much
parents.
attention. So what happens is that the child would internalize this behavior. He would see that when I was doing well, I was being praised, and when for some reason I couldn't perform well, and I'm not seeing that much attention, that's negative reinforcement. So what happens is that this is the point where the child internalizes the sense of perfection. I would say the shame of judgment, both.
Yeah,
So what happens is that the sense of perfectionism internalized in a way, the child would try much harder, even in a self-destructive behavior, to receive the praise and approval or appreciation from a authority.
and
So
it happens like when the children stay up at nights for
exactly, we know
long
that that
time.
happens, right? Even the child studying for uh, and so what's the next thing?
Oh,
Oh, that's a good topic.
yeah,
Masochism,
we have been talking about it like
yeah, I
earlier.
believe we have talked about it a lot. So again, that's what we discuss, unable to fulfill the ultimate needs of parents. Again, I believe the child craves for the appreciation by the parental figure. I believe the fatherly figure. In case of boys,
No,
I think
in case of both boys and girls.
yeah, in case of both, they are craving for their appreciation from the parental figure, and that's very
Yeah,
much seen. So enforced reinforcement, pleasing the parental figure, yeah, that's what we just discussed before. How, let's say when the child didn't perform well, right? That's what I just discussed before. If he didn't perform well in one of his tests, or for some reasons, it's not that you always have to get the good grades. So what happens is that the the parents would obviously, that's what we have talked about all in the previous talks, that they would project their shortcomings and obviously for sure their inferiorities on the child, and the child will internalize. This is the stage which internalize the dark parental ego. Now, what is dark parental ego? I would say that when the child reaches that age of 25, 26, or even 30, or even 20, what happens is that for some reason, if he is involved in something which is not morally good, right? I mean, we all commit some mistakes. No one is perfect.
Yep.
Let's say if a child is involved in something which is not morally good, then I don't know if someone else or the observer would blame the child so much more than the child will blame himself. Why? Because the dark parental ego has been so much internalized within him, which he actually received from his actual parents.
Yeah, and
So,
it is not necessarily something that is a very bad thing. They can internalize it to very trivial things too, like for example they broke something or um,
exactly. Let's say if a child broke in earlier stage at the age of 5 or 6 or even 3 or 4, if he broke a, let's say, a glass
yeah.
bottle, if he broke that, and then the if you use transaction analysis, the blaming parent ego of of the parent would directly heal the child, the vulnerable state, and that's where
Yeah,
he internalizes that. And I believe that's the stage where he learns to uh, hide the
where he
truth
learns
from
the
parents.
narcissistic behavior.
Yeah, even masochistic behavior, and even he learns to hide the truth because he
Yeah, because
fears.
he doesn't want to experience that again. He doesn't want
Exactly.
his vulnerability to be exploited again.
Exactly, and that's the stage I believe where most of our adults today, they fear being vulnerable. They have fear of vulnerability because it's a kind of traumatic experience for them. It reminds them of their all past experiences. So it's a
Yeah.
very tough stage. So what's the next point? Perfectionism and shame of judgment. Well, that's, I believe there can be a whole book written on such things, but
Mhm.
constant criticism on the child leads to internalizes of shame. Well,
Yeah,
according to
we
me,
have been
yeah,
talking about this.
I think shame is internalized in 4 steps. The first step is through social interactions. It can be, let's say, in school between teacher and a student. So that's the first step of internalizing the same. Sorry, that's the first step in shame. Second is through that social interaction, child internalizes the shame. Third step is he starts to hate those aspects of him which were shamed or bullied,
Yeah,
right? Or which were overly criticized.
yeah,
Fourth step,
just like his appearance or
yeah, it can be,
most
it can,
commonly. So it's a very common shame of not.
that's,
Uh,
yeah, that's a very much thing being experienced by people, I believe. And the fourth stage is they start to eliminate those aspects of themselves which were shamed. So that goes in their unconscious, or you can say shadow, and that would be the
yeah,
child in the next stages blaming the other child. So that's the whole pattern. So we need to know that how over criticism either leads to internalization of shame and cutting his own part of himself which goes into unconscious, and also this causes, like, the destructive criticism would also cause the child to be self-destructive in achieving
yeah.
perfection.
It's just like it's not just like at a mental level. It also gets at physical level too. They can inflict self harm.
Exactly, and that's what, again, that's the masochistic behavior.
Yeah,
They would just think that that's what they deserve.
they
So
deserve that. Deserve
yeah,
that harm.
and as I discussed, this strive for the approval of the parents. They would do anything, as we discussed before. They would do anything to please their parents, to their
Just like
teachers.
addiction, it can
Yeah,
give rise to an
and
addiction. So
that's a very, I mean, badly internalized thing. Approval addiction. It really have impact on the child, not on the child, even on the adult, because they would seek for appreciation all around, and you know that
um,
the
just
people.
just just appreciation. They will seek um, like they will not be able to make their independent decisions either.
Independent
They
scene
will
here.
just
So don't you think that they can be exploited using, like, when they seek for the appreciation, they can be exploited by anyone?
yeah they can be,
So
and they will not object to it
exactly, because they,
because they have learned and internalized the behavior of accepting that and not and not object.
Yeah, so that's what happens. I believe that that's the end of the presentation.
No,
So,
no, 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 no.
oh,
We
so
have to scapegoat. You're
oh,
scapegoating.
yeah.
You're scapegoating from the
Okay,
situation.
so there's scapegoating, projections of parent on the child. I believe that's all we
Yeah, we
discussed.
already discussed.
Yeah, that's all we
Yeah,
discussed
we
before.
already discussed it. So
And I think that's the
yeah,
end of presentation. And we'll
yeah,
be
that's a very
soon
dark
making,
end.
yeah, that's the dark end. Yeah, right. So
It's the dark end.
we'll be making more videos, and let's hope for the best. I hope you like our videos.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you very much.